Trying to do it from up there. Okay. Okay, can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. If you just forgive me, I have to read this for everybody. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, some members of the board will be meeting virtually. Members of the public are welcome to attend the meeting in person or view the meeting via live stream on the district's YouTube channel. Okay. Yep. God almighty.
Good evening, everyone. And for those of you in our audience and watching live stream, we do have one member in the audience, Mrs. Frater. Thank you for being here. We have a couple items today for our study session that we wanted to go over. And our first item is a strategic plan presentation by Dr. Robert Madonia. Dr. Madonia has worked with the district in many different capacities. Did the first strategic plan with the district back in 2015. That plan is coming to an end at this point, and we're going to ask that he kind of present his proposal this evening to the board. So I'm going to let Dr. Madonia know that he can unmute himself and begin his presentation when he is ready.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so glad to be with you this evening for our study session and to have the opportunity to speak to you about strategic planning, about what we've accomplished the last 5 years, and tell you a little bit about the process. And so it's going to be a very engaging dialogue. Looking forward to it. And thank you for inviting me here this evening. I know some of the board members were with us on our journey back in 2015, and some were not. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint that will take you through the process so that everyone is up to speed with what the process looks like, how it unfolds, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you would like about the process. What I'm also going to do at the conclusion of the PowerPoint is play for you a 2-minute Powtoon clip. It's very short, and this is something that I've put together that's brand new that I did not do back in 2015 for my clients, but it's become very popular. And it's a 2-minute Powtoon clip which outlines the steps of strategic planning in a very short period of time. I tailor it to every district. I put your name on it, and you can use it on your website to explain to everyone out there about your process. So I hope you enjoy that Powtoon clip, and we certainly can utilize that when we do our work. So what I'd like to do first and foremost is I'm going to share a screen with you. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that screen? Everyone's okay. Okay, so what I'd like to do is, and I know that Adam has passed this out to you. I think you made copies for everyone, correct, Adam? Yes. Okay, and what I'm also going to do is to send this PowerPoint electronically to Adam, and what he can do is disseminate it to all of you if you'd like to have an electronic copy. So we have that as well. But what I'd like to start to do, I know that we had a very successful strategic plan back in 2015, and it went for 5 years, and the district showed outcomes every 12 months. And that was one of the beauties of the plan. What I'd like to do here on slide 2 is just to give you an overview of a sampling of some of the strategic plans that I have done. What I did on this slide is to highlight some in the south suburban area. There are 5 listed here that are in the south suburban area, whether it's Will County or Cook County. But you can see, you know, Homewood School District is in there, and Flossmoor, which is in the southern suburbs, along with Lincoln Way and Homewood Flossmoor, and Lansing, District 158, which is in South Cook County. So that's just a sampling. I've done a number of different plans throughout the time that I've been doing this. And I've been doing strategic planning since 2009. So love it, enjoy it thoroughly. Currently, I'm doing a strategic plan. I'm actually in the middle of it right now, as you can see at the bottom of this slide in Plainfield School District 202. That's currently in progress. We're making adaptations throughout our process for COVID-19, and that's been very successful. This particular district is large. This is the 5th largest school district in the state of Illinois. There are 30 schools and 25,000 students. But what I'd like to highlight to you before we go on to slide 3 is the fact that our process works whether you are a small district, a medium-sized district, or whether you're as big as Plainfield School District 202. If you look there, third from the bottom is Hillside School District 93. That is a one-school school district. And the exact same process was used and was extremely successful. So this just gives you a little overview of some of the plans that I have done in the area, and it's just a sampling. Slide 3 here talks a little bit about the benefits of strategic long-range planning. And I know that some of the board members have experienced these benefits these last 5 years. Number one, it's an excellent planning tool for the next 5 years. And the second bullet point I can't emphasize enough because it's an outstanding public relations experience. You are engaging your community. Everyone is being involved and they're all committed to this plan at the end of the process. The third bullet point notes that it showcases the leadership of the board and the superintendent because the board and superintendent are actively involved in the process. And I think this is one of the benefits because this is an opportunity for you to connect directly with your stakeholders. You know, sometimes we can only do that at a board meeting. Sometimes we do that in other ways. However, this is an opportunity for them to see you as leaders in the district and show the hard work that you do as board members and administrators. And so the benefit is huge. I think I'm amazed at how many people have reported they really didn't know their board members like they knew them after strategic planning because they actually sat at their table and had conversations with them and planned with them and really got to know them. So I like to point out that it does showcase the leadership of board and superintendent. In addition to that, it has accountability at all levels. And I think this is probably one of the most important parts of the process that we use. Because what we find out in a number of districts is that sometimes they do a 5-year plan and they put it on a shelf and it's not active and it doesn't get brushed off. The dust doesn't get removed from it until the 5-year plan is over and they're starting a new one. That is exactly what our plan is not. Our plan has accountability at all levels. We do annual reviews, as I know you know, because we did them for you as well. And every 12 months, we meet with our strategic long-range planning committee to share with them what we've accomplished in 12 months and to give them a sneak preview of what's to come in the next 12 months. So I think that's one of the beauties of our plan, and one of the benefits is that it's continually active and it has accountability at all levels. The components of our strategic plan, let's talk a little bit about that, is certainly mission statement, development, and refinement. And I have optional down there because we review it. And if the board is comfortable with the mission statement, then there's no reason to refine it or change it. So it is an option if the board chooses to refine it or change it in any way. That is also true for the vision statement, that we would review the vision statement, take a look at it, see if it's still relevant, if it's pertinent to our needs, and we can change it if you'd like, we can modify it if you like, but if you are fine with the way it is, that certainly is left as an optional piece. The next piece is the focus areas of study. And each of these components here, we're going to go over in more detail as we go through the PowerPoint. But the focus areas of study are very important, and that is the foundation of our plan. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And then the other components are the assessments and the annual evaluation. The assessments, we actually put together a survey and get stakeholders' feedback on the focus areas of study and where the stakeholders see the district and the needs of the district for the next 5 years. So that assessment piece is done. And of course, I already referenced the annual evaluation to keep our plan relevant. At the end of our plan, we will come up with 5 prioritized items in each of our focus areas, the top 2 being the highest priorities, and those become our strategic goals. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And what we have in having the 5-item priorities in each of the focus areas is we have depth in our plan. So as we meet every year, we assess if we've met those goals. And if we have, then we move up the next set of goals to address for the following year. And then once the goals are developed, we have action plans. And the goals are more general. The action plans are very specific, very directed and direct related to what we are talking about. So let's start out with the focus areas of study. Now we're going to go over each of those components and I'm going to describe them to you. The focus areas of study, these are the basic elements of how we go about our work. They are rooted in the focus areas of study for strategic planning. Now what we do is we'll have a 2-hour board study session where we will brainstorm among our board members and administrators what is important for the district for the next 5 years. We'll have easels around the room. Every single comment a board member or administrator makes, we will note on those easels. And you will note that as I write them on the easels, I'll be categorizing them. So is this something finance related? Is this something curriculum related? Is this public relations related? You know, what category does it fall into? So we'll go through and brainstorm and have everyone given the opportunity, all board members and administration, to note what their view is about what's important for the next 5 years. At the end of that evening, we will have categories of great brainstormed ideas that are relevant for the next 5 years. Those categories that are yielded from this work session become our focus areas of study. So for example, one very common in school districts is finance, because as you know, districts everywhere in Illinois are trying to keep fiscally solvent. Curriculum is a common one, but you will find districts that will have focus areas of study that are unique to them and not common every place else. So, but the point is, after you have completed that evening, you will have, it's typically 5 or 6 focus areas of study that our plan will use to do planning. Our process will use those focus areas to do planning. So then in slide 6, we're going to talk about the evaluation component that is important in our process. So once these 5 or 6 focus areas of study have been identified by the board, then we're going to collect from all stakeholders their feedback on what they think is important in those focus areas of study. And the board and the Strategic Long Range Planning Committee will take that information into consideration as we do our planning with the Strategic Long Range Planning Group for 2 days. Now, so the survey will be put together. I will work with the district to get it exactly the way you want it. I'll put together the template and I will put samples in there for you, and then I'll go back and forth with Dr. Thorns to make it exactly relevant to you. Because as you know, there are things going on in the district that I may not be aware of and may be important for us to ask questions about that. So this is very, very important. And once that survey is complete, we'll turn it over to the technology department. They'll put it into a template that will then be put on the web. That can be a monkey survey, that can be a Google survey, it can be whatever template that your tech team decides is appropriate and best for you. Typically, the survey is out for stakeholder feedback for 2 weeks. Once that time period is complete, then I will disaggregate the data from the survey and put together a summary of the key points of our survey. And that summary will be presented to the Strategic Long-Range Planning Committee for their review as they are planning. The other thing, as I shared, that is an evaluation component is a piece that we already referenced, and that's our annual evaluation of our plan, which is an evaluation component. And again, I want to stress that because it's unique to our process. Not every strategic planning in districts have that annual review, and it's so important to the vitality and the importance of keeping the plan front and center. So we also want to point out that our plan is data-driven. And as you know, that's something we hear all the time is, well, are our decisions data-driven? What about the data and what does it speak to? So we will have data through survey data. We'll have action plans that'll be written to achieve our goals that will note current data, identify data targets, and note outcomes related to data. So I want to point that out as well. Now, let's talk a little bit in this slide 8 about an opportunity that I give to the board, and I also give to the Strategic Long-Range Planning Committee, which is to share with them best practice in our field of education. And this is an opportunity to inform the committee what is current in the field. What are the things that are cutting edge? You have to understand that our committee is very diverse, and we want it to be. You know, you're going to have people with absolutely no educational background. You might have some educators. You might have the president of a bank in your community. You might have a municipal official, but they don't necessarily have that educational background. And so giving them some background on what's best practice and cutting edge in the field is beneficial for them to think about those items as they approach planning in our process. And this sets the stage for these items, if pertinent to the district, will be considered. Now let's talk a little bit about the Strategic Long-Range Planning Committee. Now what we do with our committee is we tap people on the shoulder that we know are important to be part of our group. Like, for example, what's really important is to have the heads of our parent organizations, since they are such a vital piece of our school districts everywhere, but also certain community people that are very, very important. We're going to invite them to join us. And we did that last time, and we had some great response from your community. Your community was super. And if you'll recall, during our 2 days of planning, the dialogue was wonderful. So, and then what we also will do, we'll throw it out there for volunteers to say, would anybody like to join us in the Strategic Long-Range Planning Committee to focus and plan for the future for the next 5 years? What we do then is we take and have them fill out a form to give them a little bit of background about themselves so that we know how they would fit into our group. And usually our committee is made up of school community members, parents, teachers, administrators, school board members, there's a vast array of different stakeholder groups, and that's how we want it. With that much diversity of types of people, we get diversity of thinking, which just gives us a more formidable plan. Once we then solidify our committee, then what we do is we assign people to focus area groups. And we do that for a reason. In all of my strategic planning, we do that in all of our plans. And the reason is because human nature being what it is, if I had 75 people or 50 people and they walked in a room, they would have a tendency, naturally so, to gravitate to a table of people they know. And that's not always the best for planning. What's best for planning is, for example, if we identify someone who has financial background, we want them in our finance group. So we want to have the mix relevant and appropriate for our planning. And by proactively making those assignments, that helps a great deal. So we start the recruitment of the committee very early on in our process so that by the time we're ready for our planning, we have a full complement of people. Now, I shared with you, and I'm going to go over this with you now on slide 10, a little bit about how the board and the administration are involved in this process. So what we like to do is have one board member or two at each table, each focus area table, and an administrator at each focus area table. And they have the following roles. One of them has the role of being the facilitator of the small focus area group. The other person has the role of being the data keeper. And so now there is no specific role for a specific person. It's what your comfort zone is. So a board member representative can be the facilitator in that small group, or the board member can be the data keeper, or the administrator can be either of those two roles as well. With that said, I also have training that I like to give to the board. It's a 2-hour study session before we engage with the committee, giving them some training on how to facilitate at that level. How do we bring people to consensus? What do we do with a person who doesn't talk very much? How do we draw them out? How do we keep on task? How do we deal with someone who monopolizes the conversation? How do we deal with all the different things that will be at that area table? And then at this study session, what we also do is we do a role play where actually I have the board members and the administrators actually do a mock-up for about 25 to 30 minutes of what they will be doing in the 2 days of planning with the Strategic Long Range Planning Committee. This yields at the end of the evening, all board members and all administrators completely understanding the process, and all board members and administrators feeling very comfortable with what they are about to engage in. We think this is really important. And again, you're starting to see that this plan of how we approach strategic planning is focusing in on getting diversity of opinion and getting the best plan possible, and also public relations. Very, very important. And as you'll recall, when we did all of our steps in the last plan in 2015 through 2020, you will recall our evaluation of our 2 days with the Strategic Planning Committee, and the outcomes were unbelievable. I mean, our evaluation were in the 90 percentiles of satisfaction with the process. It was in the 90 some odd percentiles in having stakeholders feel they were heard and engaged. And at the end of those 2 days, those community committee members walked out of that session feeling completely committed to this process because they did it. And they own it. and they're going to make sure it succeeds. So they are real good, really flag wavers for this process. And I know those of you that were there will remember that feeling at the end of those 2 days. It was quite astonishing to see that happen. So we're very excited about seeing that repeat itself one more time. So then in slide 11, we talk a little bit about logos, and one that we have used in the past, and certainly we can use it again, or we can develop our own, is I like Team 127.5, which stands for Together Expecting and Achieving More. So in other words, we're going for high outcomes, but we're doing it as a team, and we're doing it with our community stakeholders, which is very cool. Very engaging, and an opportunity that is very dramatic. So let me start out by talking a little about the time frame of our 2 days with the Strategic Long Range Planning Committee. Typically, boards choose 2 days, a Friday evening from 6 to 9 and a Saturday session from 8 until noon. And I have to tell you, and you'll recall this when we did it, I never go over. And I feel committed to that because these people are volunteering and I respect their time. I'm not going to give them a time frame and then say, oh, sorry, we have to go 2 hours later. We're going to lose the enthusiasm and the morale of the group, and I will never let that happen. So we always stay strictly to our time frames. Now that's a typical option, a Friday evening, Saturday morning from 8 until noon. But other districts have opted for 2 evenings back to back, and that's another option. So 6 to 9:30, 2 evenings back to back. And certainly we can do that. What we say to our committee throughout the entire process is that whatever we put together is a recommendation to the board. We make that very clear. We don't give any indication whatsoever that what we put together is a slam dunk, that it will be in the final plan. Because the reality is, and I think people understand this, that the Board of Education is the ultimate authority in any district. And so also is true in your district. So you have to approve that plan before it becomes final. And so we never let community members or anyone working with us feel any differently than knowing that this is a recommendation to the board and that the board has the right to change any part of it, but will seriously take into consideration everything that the stakeholders have brought forward in the recommendation. So we make that very clear. So now what I'd like to do is to go over for you on slide 13 how the committee process works. And for those of you board members that were with us, you're going to recall this. And for those of you that are not, this will give you some idea of what the process is like. So the results of our survey will be on every focus area table. So if we have 5 focus areas, there'll be 5 tables. If we have 6 focus areas, there'll be 6 tables, so forth. And the survey summary will be on the center of that table for committee review. Now, one thing I make very clear to the committee is we do not plan the strategic long range plan off of the survey. That would not be a good idea. The survey is one piece of data. And we take that into consideration as we plan, which rightfully we should. But what we also want to take into account is the dialogue we have during these 2 days and the data that surfaces with all these great ideas during this 2 days of dialogue with our stakeholders that we then will infuse with feedback from our stakeholders via the survey and come up with the best plan possible. So the first charge of every focus area, and before we put the focus areas out there for independent work on day 1, I present a presentation to the committee about why we're here, what our charge is. I explain the process, and I also set norms. What are the expectations and rules of our process? How does this work smoothly, and what are the norms? So I make that very, very clear. And I also give the committee during that general presentation, I give them a little bit of an overview of best practice in education and talk a little bit about that. I also make them aware that myself and Dr. Thorns will travel continuously from table to table to table to help in this endeavor. We want to be there to answer any questions that you might have and to move forward with our process. So what we're going to do is each group, each focus area group is going to have a sign on their table representing that focus area, and each group will have a color designation. So, finance might be green, curriculum, for example, if that's an area, might be blue. They'll each have a color. And so what we will do is move forward with our work and have an easel with block paper at each table where we will put up our data. Now, also, we'll have an extra easel in the middle of the room, and that's our parking lot. Now, a parking lot is there for a reason, because we want to stay focused, and ideas may surface that are not pertinent to our discussion, and we don't want them diminished, but we'll put them in the parking lot for the board to look at and read and review for future reference. That respects the person giving that opinion on the item that's not relevant to our discussion, and also allows us to move forward with the process. So that's very important as well. Now, what the tech department will do is put together a Google Docs document, actually 2 of them. And every data keeper at all the tables will have a laptop and access to the Google Docs document. At the end of day 1, the data keeper will type in what we've accomplished on day 1. And at the end of day 2, at the end of our process, the data keeper will type it in on Google Docs number 2. So we'll have a record of it after both days. So now the first charge of the focus area group is to identify, as you can see in bullet point 3, each group will identify a 5-item prioritized list of the most important items in that category. So what that means is that the facilitator at that table is going to go around the table and get input from all the people around the table, and ideas will surface. The data keeper is basically going to log those ideas and put them into categories. Like what are some of these ideas and so forth and so on. And when we do the training for this, we'll tell you specifically how to do this and some of the strategies to utilize to make this efficient and effective. Now, once that's complete, and that's typically a 90-minute exercise, okay? But once that's complete, we're going to have each group write a 5-item prioritized list on the easel that's in front of their table. Now, that has to be in a sentence form. Eventually, the itemized priorities will become goals, so they should be written in a general nature because the action items are going to be super specific to achieve those goals. Once that's complete, that ends day 1. And what we're going to do is then take the Google Docs document that has all 5 focus areas, 5-item prioritized list on it on one sheet of paper. And we're going to print that all out for every committee member. Then what we will do is go to day 2. And they will look at the 5-item prioritized list, each group, of all the other groups. So for example, if there are 5 focus areas and you're the finance group, let's just use that as the example, you're going to look at the other 4 groups' 5-item prioritized list on the sheet that's given to you from the Google Docs document. And then your group's going to have a discussion on how you view the other groups. You're going to give input to all the other focus areas. For example, how if curriculum is another area and you're in finance, you're going to say to curriculum after having a discussion at your table, well, you know what? You put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but we actually think it should be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're going to log and note why you think that way. So at the end of that exercise on day 2, every focus area is going to have their input into the 5-item prioritized list of every group of the 5 or 6 focus areas. And so once that's complete, then what we will do is we will have the facilitator from each group, each focus area group. Let's say we're going to use finance as one of our examples. They'll go up to finance table, and if there are 5 groups, there'll be 4 people standing at that finance table. The easel of the finance table will have the 5-item prioritized list of the finance group. So then we're going to take each group and they're going to list on their easel their numbers of how they viewed the order. So again, in my example where curriculum's doing this to finance, curriculum's going to go up there and they're going to say, no, this should be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here's why. And they'll explain why. And then myself as a facilitator, I'm going to say to the finance group, well, how do you respond to that, finance? And they're going to say, well, here's why we don't believe that. Or they might, and they'll explain it, and it'll become a full engagement of dialogue of the whole committee on every area. So the bottom line is that you start to see refinement in the list and the order. So at the end of that exercise, if there are 5 focus areas, you've got 5 sets of numbers. So the first item, you'll see where it all lies. If the majority of 1s are 1, the majority of 2s are 2, and so forth on down the line. And so then each group keeps a record of data of what they heard from all the other groups when we have this dialogue. And then we take a few minutes and we allow each group to digest everything they heard and to put the final 5-item prioritized order on their easel. So they'll have Post-it notes and they'll put the final order up there based on the dialogue we've had, or maybe insert some phrases or change some verbiage, whatever, but that will all take place. And then the final exercise is we actually give everybody an envelope with, if there are 6 groups, I'm just making this up, 12 adhesive colored dots, 2 of each color, which represents each of the 6 focus areas in the example I just gave you. So what we do is we have everybody say, okay, we're going to stand up and go get a cup of coffee. We want you to move from easel to easel. And you personally vote on your number 1 and 2 in each of these areas. Now, what I find by doing that, it's a great public relations thing and people feel good about voicing their opinion. But to the 98% level, it's always the same as the final order of what has been established. And the reason for that is because we just had this 90-minute dialogue of the whole group and came to some consensus. So, but it's a nice exercise and people feel good about voting for what they feel are important. At the bottom of this slide 15, you'll see another bullet point, and it's establishing action plans for each goal. So what I will do then is take the number 1 and number 2 item in each of the 6 goals, or 6 items, and I'll make them goals. I'll polish the verbiage, and that's what we're going to address first. Priority number 3 will become the next priority when we finish the first 2 goals, and so forth. That's the depth of our plan. That's why it's good for 5 years. And every year we meet to find out where we're at with it and should we move up another goal. The next step is for the administrators to write action plans to deliver these goals that are very specific. This is very important, and the administrators do this in every district where I serve strategic planning. because they're the ones that have to deliver the outcomes. So we want the roadmap made by them is how to get to our goal, how to get to our outcome. And they know that in 12 months, they have to report out their progress. So, and once that's complete, then what I will do is I will put together a base template brochure, which will have your top 2 goals and your action plans in them. And you can then have your tech department or art department put additional graphics in or send it out to a printer. You can do whatever you like, but the base template will be done for you as part of the service that I provide. Now, what I did here in slide 16 is just for your review. You can look at that. I won't go over the whole thing, but I kind of just mapped out, if you started in January, you could, it takes 4 months, maybe a little bit less. We could, if you started in January, we could have this completed by your April board meeting, is how I'm looking at this. But understand that this is just a sample calendar that we utilize. So what I'm going to do now is I want to play for you a very quick Powtoon clip. It's only 2 minutes long. And then what I'd like to do is open it up for any questions that you might have. And then we can have a dialogue about that. So here's the Powtoon clip. Let's put this up here. Can everyone see that? Okay, good. Okay, let me stop the share here. All right, we're back now. Let me open it up to any questions that you might have. Yeah, yes, Elaine.
Well, I just wanted to say, Doctor, that honestly, every time I hear you talk, I 100% appreciate it. You're always extremely insightful, and you always never fail to have a clearly articulated procedure laid out every time you come to speak to us. And I just wanted to say that, like I said, whenever you speak, it's just really appreciated. But looking at your plan, what I really enjoyed about it and what I really thought was important is the fact that you have absolutely thought out specific ways to get community involved in the strategic plan, either through surveys and also live on committees. And I think that's just extremely important, just to make sure that everyone can be involved in the process. But also you make it clear that regardless of whatever the committees put together, ultimately the board is going to make the decision and adopt it. So I just wanted to say, as always, I really enjoyed the presentation. I thought it was fantastic. So I don't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to say, I thought it was, as usual, I thought it was great.
Well, thank you very much. I want you to know that part of that is just kind of a passion I have for this, because I really enjoy doing it. And that's why I've been doing it since '09, is because I really enjoy it. And I get a great deal of satisfaction out of seeing the outcomes, really do. And so I thank you for your comments. That's very kind of you. Any other questions or thoughts?
Dr. Madonia, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Obviously with COVID and everything going on, what are some ways that we could still having public participation in this in the community if we are still seeing the issues we are seeing in our state and in Chicago Ridge and Oak Lawn?
Well, that's an excellent question. And what I will do when I finish here today, besides sending you this PowerPoint in case you want to send it to them electronically, is a contingency plan that I have for COVID. I drew that plan together, and that's the one we're currently using in Plainfield School District 202. But what it boils down to is depending on what the circumstances are. So for example, if we're allowed gatherings of 25, that's one issue. If we're allowed gatherings of 50, that's another issue. You know, there's different scenarios. And so what we can do is, and what we're doing in Plainfield that we also can implement in Chicago Ridge, if that scenario plays out, is we're putting each focus area group in a separate classroom. So if you have 6 focus areas, they're in 6 different classrooms. And what we do is simulcast that with a Zoom, and everyone can still dialogue. If the individual group wants to meet and discuss, they just mute their video and their audio, and they can have the discussion in the room, okay? But when we have the full group discussion, we simulcast that through Zoom, and we still can achieve all the things we've talked about. But I do have a contingency plan, and I'll send that to you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Does anyone else, it looks like Nancy has a question.
Nancy, I think you have to unmute your button.
Dr. Madonia?
Oh, okay, now I can hear you.
I don't know if I'm mistaken or not. We didn't do a board administrator training the last time.
I think we did.
It's gonna be
No, I think we
significant,
did.
especially for the new members.
I think we did, because I do that with all of them. Yeah, because that's an important piece. Because if we don't do that training, I find that board member, because you know there's so much to it that they feel some levels of apprehension going into the 2 days of planning. And once they go through those 2 hours, they're fine. They know every step that's going to happen. It's all pre-planned. But my recollection is that we did it, because I don't think I've ever done a plan that I didn't.
Okay. Then maybe it's just me.
Oh, no problem. But I think that piece is really important. You know, not only to refresh the board members who've been through the process before, but to indoctrinate those that have not, so that they feel comfortable. Because, you know, when you're in front of your stakeholders, you want to be prepared. You know, you don't want to feel like, gee, I don't know what to do now. I want you comfortable. I want you completely comfortable. I want you to be proactive. We want to be proactive and not reactive, and be prepared. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Can I unmute? Is it okay?
Oh, now I can hear you.
I know, but sometimes there's an echo effect. So I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm a relatively new board member. I was not part of the previous planning. And I have had the pleasure to see you at the conference as well as hear you last time you came. My curiosity is I would love to be engaged in the process. But due to the pandemic, I am one of the board members who often, in fact, has always come in remotely. And so based on my health needs, it's almost impossible for me to meet in person in a large group. And so I'm curious, is there a possibility if we are still in the same kind of level of pandemic that this can be done virtually, or does it have to be in person?
No, it can be done virtually, it can be done in person, or a combo thereof.
Okay, that was my curiosity because I, just for some board members, I know that's an issue, and maybe it might even be for community members might not be comfortable coming in.
Because the whole basis of the contingency plan is Zoom connected. So, you can certainly come in on Zoom, just as we're utilizing the platform from the very beginning. So that's not a problem.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to say, I also don't think we should be putting our teachers and administrators into that position where they have to come in to be part of this process, because we're not allowing any additional visitors into the school. So it would not make sense to do that for this particular reason. And it actually makes sense to me that we put this off. I'm just going to put that out there right now.
Well, and let me just reply to that. Looking at the calendar that's there, I mean, certainly it's up to you to when you want to do it, but that component of it, when we have everyone together, is at in the last, second to last month. So that would probably be, if you started in January, that would be a March endeavor. So depending on what would happen via March, or you can put the whole thing off and shift it to the summer and the fall. I mean, that's fine. But the place where you have big group gatherings that we have to modify for would not come till near the end of the process, which would be the month before its completion. So we start in January. Matter of fact, if you look at that sample calendar there, you can see, I believe it was March. So anytime in March. And sometimes what we've done, like now, for example, the one I'm doing in Plainfield, because that's a very good question. The one I'm doing in Plainfield right now, we're scheduled to do our committee on the 13th and the 14th of November. Now, we are putting COVID restrictions in, we're doing all that, but with the recent lockdown or further restrictions now in Cook County and Will and all these other counties, we may be moving that forward. And so you even can do everything else and then just move forward the two-day committee and just keep moving it forward until we're comfortable with it, or you can move the whole process. Does that make sense? Okay, good question though. Anyone else?
Well, thank you, Dr. Madonia. We appreciate you presenting your proposal to us, and we hope you have a good rest of your evening.
All right, will do, and I'll send that information to you electronically, and then you can disseminate it to the board.
That sounds great. Thank you very much.
All right, have a nice evening, everyone.
You too.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Madonia.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
If we move on to our second item, we have a discussion and question and answer on the in-person hybrid model and the return to in-person learning. I just wanted to share my screen real quick and just give a quick update on where we are as far as the metrics. So if you just bear with me for a second. I won't be able to see everyone, so I just have 3 slides that I want to present, and then I will I'll stop sharing and answer any questions. As everyone knows, we started 2.5 weeks ago bringing some of our students back. We started with our pre-K and kindergarten, and then our 6th graders who had never been in the junior high before, as well as some of our special education students and EL students. last Monday, we brought back every single grade level for those students who had signed up for in-person learning. And so we're now 2.5 weeks into having students in the building, and very, very excited about that. But obviously, anyone who's turned on the news or listened to the radio or opened up a newspaper or just talked with people knows that in Illinois, our number of COVID cases is going up. So I wanted to share specifically with Chicago Ridge. You've heard me talk in previous meetings about that 8% positivity rate being the area where we really need to start looking a little bit more closely. And you'll see Chicago Ridge all the way back in September, which would have been our first full week of school. We were over 16% for a positivity rate. And it has gone down until a couple weeks ago, where we hit our low point at about 3.5%. And it has been steadily climbing back up. Right now, we are at 6.6% in Chicago Ridge for positive, and that's a 7-day rolling average. We've also, I've shared this before, our 7-day positivity rate for our local districts, our communities. We have Chicago Ridge in the blue, Oak Lawn in the yellow, Worth in the green, Palos Hills, I'm going to say that's orange, and Elsip in the teal. And you'll notice Chicago Ridge is all the way at the bottom of those local communities, which is great for Chicago Ridge, but it also means we have to be very cognizant of what is happening everywhere else, because I've used this phrase numerous times, that the virus doesn't know borders. It doesn't just stop and not come over. We all shop in the same places, we go to the same stores. So that's important to remember. And then I just wanted to show an update on our dashboard metrics, the ones, and it looks like it's going to make this a little more difficult for me. So let me see if I can get it real quick. Should be, let's see if this is the right one. All right, so here is our current dashboards and some of the things that we're looking at beyond the positivity rates. One of the number one things that we're looking at are confirmed school transmissions, and those are how many cases have been passed or can be traced back to the school. And right now, we have 0 this week, and we have 0 overall within the district schools. Let me slide down. Then if we look at confirmed positive students, this week we had our first confirmed positive student, and normally we would send out a letter to the entire school that was where that student was located, and we would also put that letter on the website. It wouldn't identify that student. But in this case, the student was actually a student who has been 100% remote all year. So has not stepped foot in any of our buildings this year. But that was our first student out of 1,447 that we have had confirmed positive this week. Confirmed positive staff, we have not had any staff at this time test positive. Students quarantined, either due to positive diagnosis or a close contact exposure, both inside and outside of school. And we have had 6 students who are currently being quarantined because of close contacts. A lot of them, whether it's a parent who might have gotten it at work, or they're a close contact to just someone else that they know. But we currently have 6 students who are quarantined. We have 31 who right now were absent today just for a myriad of reasons, but that could just be they showed a symptom of cough, but nobody else who has been considered a close contact.
Okay, if a student is in quarantine, do they remote into the regular class then?
Okay, so not the regular class. We've talked with the parents who have done that, and they are given the choice of continuing asynchronously with that same teacher, just receiving the work, or they can then move to a remote class.
Okay.
So, all right. And then staff who are quarantined, we currently have 6 of our staff members, which is at 3% of our staff who is quarantined due to being close contacts. And that is probably one of our biggest numbers that we have to watch, even when our numbers are lower in Chicago Ridge. We still have to make sure that we're able to staff our buildings, which is really important. So I just wanted to share of those metrics with everyone before I kind of open it up to questions, but I just wanted to give you an update, but I'm going to open it up to anyone who has any questions about the reopening. Mrs. Egan.
Can you repeat what you said to Nancy? It was cutting in and out about what happens when students have to quarantine.
As far as, so if we have a student who has to quarantine, we're allowing parents to make the decision if they want to work asynchronously with the same teacher that they've had to be able to kind of keep that consistency going, or if they want to make sure that they are receiving the live instruction, they can also go into that remote classroom.
I see. Okay. And so are the remote teachers and the hybrid teachers trying to stay within the same?
Yes.
I mean, not necessarily exactly.
We've tried to make sure that they are planning together and working together to ensure that it's as close as possible.
Okay. And are there teachers in the district that are not assigned, but are just being assigned as permanent subs within the district, where there are subs available at all times, or we're bringing strangers?
Not currently. One of the things we had talked about, if we ever had to get to that point, that we would look at some of our special area people having to move to asynchronous and record lessons and become subs. But right now, nobody has had that yet. So
it's just going out to the general sub pool for strangers to be coming into the buildings?
We have some permanent subs that we hired earlier in the year. I believe we had 2 at Lawn and 2 at Central. And Finley, I believe we have 1 permanent sub who was hired.
Okay.
Does anyone else have? Oh,
Are
sorry, Mrs. Egan, go ahead.
Are all of the teachers' schedules then comparable and full in the same?
As far as making sure their day is filled up with everything, yes. Yeah, we sat down and looked at everyone's schedules, and if they had openings, we did have them put in different areas.
Okay, and was there any resolve to giving services in person or remote services to some of the struggling like RTI students or intervention students?
So we have 1 or 2 reading specialists who, with their open times, that they are servicing some students, not as many who have been serviced in the past, but they are servicing some students. Any other questions from anyone? Ms. Davenport?
I had a few, but I won't hog the mic, so to speak. I'll pass the table after a couple. Maybe someone else will cover a question I have. But you went through the different matrix about how COVID cases are increasing, at least in surrounding areas. So one of the questions I have is, let's assume numbers do start to rise with COVID, either in the surrounding areas around Chicago Ridge or even within our district. If the school can maintain social distancing and wear masks,
I think we have to consider all things right now, and the biggest one is to see within the school, what is that looking like in terms of safety? Are we able to keep our kids and our staff safe, and in turn our families, or are we seeing cases being transmitted within the school or cases being traced back to the school? So I think even as we see numbers rising, we definitely need to keep into consideration what's happening in the schools, and vice versa. Even if the numbers are good in the town, but we're seeing cases for some reason in the schools, we would have to look at possibly pivoting at that point.
Is there some threshold or number or some bottom line that would result in administration making that determination to go back to remote? Like, what is that line that would have to happen And my second part of my question for that will be, is there a way that the public can on their own look at numbers or going to the dashboard maybe that you've already described? Is there a way community members can kind of anticipate where things are going? Just so I guess in an ideal world,
Yeah,
they don't just
I think
randomly get a
the
message
biggest thing
one
is that
day
there's
saying,
not a
"Hey, by the
drop
way, school's
dead
gonna be
number.
closed in a day."
And that is in talking
So
with
kind of a twofold
public health
question.
departments. You've even seen in some of the communities in DuPage and Lake County where their departments of public health have stated that they believe that most districts should go 100% remote at this time. You've seen districts look at their own metrics and say, we still feel safe right now. I do think one of the biggest concerns is how many cases are we getting here in the schools and that transmission number. I would say those numbers on the dashboard are very important to look at. And positivity rate is important to look at. If you continue to see it climb, that's something that we will need to keep in mind. But that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we are updating and the community at least weekly, if not more, on those dashboards that are on the website at all times. That's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we are updating at least weekly, if not more, on those dashboards.
Someone else has a question.
Can I keep going? I can keep going. If someone else has a question though, I don't want to like keep talking. Does someone else have a question? Otherwise I'll ask another question. I got questions. And I hope, and just so everybody knows, I'm not only just asking as a board member, but as a parent with kids at the school, these are just some questions I personally have. So I would assume maybe some family members have as well, but all right, I'll just keep asking. Another question I had is, does the school have any type of objective or specific feedback as to whether or not our students are actually meeting goals as the year progresses? It was a really bumpy end to last year. I think there was a huge learning curve and everyone, the teachers, staff did just phenomenal considering it was just a really difficult time for everybody.
Yeah.
But as we started
I would say we're starting to get a clear picture.
Both starting remote and now going into the hybrid, have we been able to objectively see that our students are hitting goals and we are on the right track, or is it still kind of we're not sure?
But they've also, those students who have come back in person, just the different skills that are necessary. They are seeing that they're kind of having to go back and reteach a few of those. An example is something with math, where a kid would normally have learned by now. They might need to look at a ruler or a number line on their desk, that they haven't picked that up because they haven't been in the classroom at that point. A lot of it right now has been local assessments in the class, teacher created assessments. We are talking about what would an assessment look like, a school-wide assessment come the winter. And again, it will kind of depend on where we are right now. But we did not want to take the time at the start of the year to sit down and assess every kid on math, because we just felt there was more important stuff like the social emotional aspect for the kids. But we do know that as the year goes on, we have to be able to look at those benchmarks and get a clear picture. We did not want to take the time at the start of the year. Nancy? You're good on me. But we do know that as the year goes on, we have to be able to look at those benchmarks.
I'm not mistaken. We've also you used math as an indicator of what some kids, and we've had some similar ones with the younger kids with reading. Am I right? With some of the kids, especially like kindergarten kids, they went into first grade and they didn't get to complete their lead up to reading, in last year. I know there were some kids from the neighborhood that had issues with reading at the beginning of the year. That's all being worked on.
Yeah, we've definitely been able to assess kids even remotely. Clearly, again, more teacher driven and trying to understand where their deficits are and trying to make sure that we are addressing those right away. And that's one of the nice things, that even though our students in person are only in person for 2.5 hours, our class sizes are much smaller than they normally are. And we've been able to keep our remote classes at a decent number. And I think that's really important. I heard some other districts who've combined entire districts of a grade level, and you're talking 80 kids on a Zoom for a class. And I think remote teaching and learning is difficult enough. And I think it's important to be able to keep those class sizes as small as possible.
I do. With COVID and with our having to clean and make sure that we're adhering to all safety precautions, I know there's been additional contracts, additional expenses, but, and I guess more want a confirmation, at least from my understanding, the school is still functioning within its budget, correct?
Yeah, and I don't know if Kathy would have anything to add, but we were given our additional,
As the lights shut
we were
down.
given our additional CARES money, which is supposed to be used to support all the different things that we had to put in place. And so we are working within budget, and I think that's a very important point to make, that although we have had expenditures we've never had before, we also received money for that reason and haven't just spent it wildly, but have understood what we can do in that frame.
And I will add that there will be a reallocation of the budget. When we started our budget, we knew a dollar amount, but we really didn't know the district needs. So we put in the budget, but now that we're in this for a couple of months, we're seeing needs where we did not budget. So we will be amending the grant probably in the next couple of months.
Elaine?
This is like my last set of questions, unless someone says something that triggers it. But I got more specific questions about the daycare that we've utilized through the park district. I got, like, I guess you could call it sub questions within my main question. But I guess my first question, and most importantly, is how is it working out?
Mute so they don't get the next one.
As long as you don't forget about me, because I got more.
So Ivy League is the organization that is currently providing daycare for our students before, after, and during school for when they are not there the 2.5 hours. And we are up to 14 students currently who are utilizing that, and they get picked up and dropped off. And I know I've spoken with 2 parents specifically. One is a grandparent, and she actually works in our district at the front desk. And she has one of her grandkids there, and just said that her daughter thinks it's like the best daycare she's been a part of. And then the opposite side of that, we had another mom who reached out and said that they did not believe their child was getting enough help with the remote learning. And so we reached out to them, had the mom talk with them, and immediately the next day she said it's 100% improvement and doing great. Talked with the director of the park district. We do have our custodian going over there and cleaning it. Sammy and Phil have been going over there, and that part has been going very well. They've said they're, not surprisingly, but they're doing a great job of keeping up with that. So.
Thank you, Sam.
Mrs. Egan?
I know Elaine is kind of in the middle and has more, but I guess now you've just mentioned 2 custodians. And I know when it was brought up at the first time about having to pay 1 custodian overtime, that I asked if there were schedule changes that could happen so that nobody was needing overtime. And now you're saying 2 people. So I feel very surprised to hear that. Also with the small number of students, I also had brought up asking about using the library space or the gym spaces within our own buildings so that there wasn't any need to utilize the park district after the hoops that had to be jumped through, and paying our people overtime to do so. So I'm just wondering if there's, you know, if you can give a status on that, and if that could be, if that's going to continuously be looked at.
Yes, it's definitely, we're going to continue to look at it. And when I say we have 2 people going there, we realize it takes about 2 hours to clean it and sanitize it. And so it takes 1 person 2 hours. We have 2 going there at the same time who are each working an hour at that time. So they're done. They start at 6, they are done at 7. Currently, we don't have any areas in the schedule with some of the shifts that have occurred and we anticipate happening in the next week or so. But it's something we're going to continue to look at to see that. And then as far as possibly housing it here in our district, I do want to continue to look at how many people are going to be in it. We started with 4 last week, and we're seeing it continue to grow as word of mouth is out there. I would say after about 3 to 3.5 weeks, we'll have a good idea of where that number is going to be capped at, and then we can make some determinations if we need to. Ms. Davenport?
Can you describe what your thought process was in not having the students housed in our gym for that daycare?
We really wanted to offer maximum flexibility for whatever plans we were putting in place here, and also for teacher space, just to make sure if we needed to shift people. Right now at Ridge Central, the lunchroom is being used as an intervention area that students go. The gym is being used for one of our gym teachers to teach, and we can move some things around. But right now we want to offer that flexibility to ensure that we've got that room for everything. Mrs. Petropoulos?
PE is a special, so one of the physical education teachers needs the gym to teach in. Like, isn't there an office in there if they're doing, kind of synchronous videos or what have you? I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Such a huge space being used for one teacher to do, a Zoom meeting. And it's such a large space. That's all, that it could be being utilized for so much more. I know I get the idea, because I also, from what Elaine brought up, I wanted to ask about, some of the, I guess the use of the Park District facility and not having RA as opposed to having Ivy League, and just some questions about that in general. But if you could just, the thing about the gym, so to speak, first, I guess.
Yeah, so right now, like at Ridge Central, I would say just about every single space is being utilized in some way. In the gym, we have one teacher who is in the office of the gym and another who is in the gymnasium. Again, that's something that we can definitely switch around if we need to. But we also, when we were originally planning on schedules and stuff, if we needed to use the gym as a classroom because we had too many people in person. And again, it comes down to knowing where that cap is going to be for how many students are going to be involved in the Ivy League program. And if we're able to bring them back and we don't need that flexibility and we think we're set, we're definitely open to doing that. And I know you had brought up the idea of how kind of why RA is not part of it right now as opposed to Ivy League. And both myself and Mrs. Salzer have been talking with the Park District all the way back in July and kind of seeing where we could be at. And when we did announce our AM and PM model, and it was pretty evident that our parents were going to need some type of childcare during the day, not just before or after school care. RA is a before and after school program. They're not ones that work with the students in remote learning. They were interested in running a before and after school. And so when we realized that we would need to offer more, I did reach out to Ivy League and see if that would be something that they would be interested in doing. I had worked with them in my previous district. I talked to other districts who were using them currently. And even at that point, we still did talk with the Park District and said we could run just the daycare during the day. And if you still wanted to do a RA type program from 3 to 6. And at that time, they said, no, we'll let Ivy League take that part as well.
So just to clarify, the Park District could not accommodate during the day, so we went to Ivy League. And then you did offer that they could still do before or after school, I'm sorry, if they chose, and they declined that so then Ivy League had the position, so to speak. Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure was clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that
modest.
us and the Park District have talked throughout this entire process, and we continue to talk. So, Ms. Egan, if you had a question.
Not a question, just a comment. You're being extremely modest. The fact that you became such a problem solver and found a way to take care of the kids before and after school needs when the Park District wouldn't, it's not couldn't, but wouldn't, is nothing short of amazing, because that is not something that you had to do. You took a problem that our kids had and found a solution that would work. So I'm sure that those 14 families are extremely grateful that you were able to do that. So thank you.
Mrs. Sulzer,
Okay.
you're on mute.
Okay, it's a little more than, I don't want to put the Park District on a spot at all here. It has to do also with a continuity of the people that were working with the kids also. So it's more than just, you know, and then for Zoom and working on the e-learning, definitely we couldn't use Rod there for them. We needed somebody who's going to be more hands-on than the Rod is. So it was a combination of things. So it's not just so like the Park District wouldn't do it. It's a combination of events that occurred that led to where it is now.
And I will say the other part is just the consistency of offering it for families, that we weren't having to change around all the time. And I've been very happy with our relationship with Park District, and I'm looking forward to working with them. And I can't wait till we're back to normal school, where we have our 8:10 to 3 o'clock, and our kids can enjoy the before and after school RA programs, which I know we usually have like 70 kids sign up for the after school program. So we are very excited to continue that. Ms. Petropoulos?
And my comment was just that there has been some, from what I've understand the community, some concerns about Rob being canceled and people not having jobs and things like that. So I just wanted to be transparent that, you know, that it wasn't an Ivy League takeover type of situation, that this was an opportunity that we were trying to give to families who wouldn't have any other means during the school day. And so that's why I brought it up. I appreciate everything that the Park District does for the community. My kids are always very active in it, as in my family is, not in RA in particular, but other things. But it is a little, you know, it is the fact that there wasn't this offer after school either, which RA could have picked up and still participated in. So I just wanted to make that transparent.
Ms. Davenport?
If I can switch gears a little bit, I think my sub questions were actually covered for the Ivy League. So if I could just switch gears, can you describe, because at least I will speak for myself as a board member, I haven't been in the schools with students here live. Can you explain if you feel, or if your feedback is that the in-person families are having a positive experience or a negative experience? And then similarly, how about the full remote families? Are they overall responding to you that they're having an overall positive experience with the full remote, or negative experience?
I can definitely speak for those who are in person, because I've had a chance to talk to the kids as they're walking out of the bus lines and I'm visiting classrooms. And they are thrilled. I spoke with one mom today that I had reached out to, who had showed some concerns when we were switching the models. And she just talked about how she has noticed a change in her kids for the positive just within this week and a half, that they're excited to do school again, and just they're happy at home when they come home. So I do think it has been a positive experience. For the remote, I do think the schedule becomes a little bit more difficult. We're finding at times you have the students coming on from 8:10 to 10:40, and then all of a sudden you're getting some kids who aren't signing back on in the afternoon. So that's something we're continuing to work through, but those families that I have spoken with up to this point have said that they do feel like their kids are still getting a very quality education and that they are still happy with the decision that they made. They feel that they're getting the same that they would have gotten otherwise in person. Elaine?
I'm sorry. And I have to go back to the Ivy League question just because it's on my mind. Can you at least, just from hearing feedback, can you explain what process you used to pick Ivy?
So again, after talking with the Park District and realizing that we were going to need someone to offer during the daytime, I had known about Ivy League for a long time. They had been in, I was a principal in Midlothian. They'd been in my buildings for 4 years for before and after school. And I also knew that they had started doing remote learning with kids in surrounding districts. So I called numerous superintendents to get a feel of how that had been going, as well as what prices they were charging, because daycare is expensive everywhere, but to at least make sure that it was reasonable comparatively. And then, so at that time, then reached out to the Park District to see if they would be willing to have Ivy League come in and look at the facilities and to kind of talk to them about what was going to happen.
And just as a follow-up, and not to be offensive, but just to get the question out there, there's no family relation you have with Ivy League, nor are you aware of any family relationship between Ivy League and anyone at the Park District?
I'm not aware of anyone at the Park District. When I met with the director and the director of Ivy League, that was the first time they had ever met. They didn't know each other. And to be honest, I was disappointed. I had called the owner of Ivy League months ago just to see if we ever ran into something, and never got a call back from him. It wasn't until I called someone else that we actually got through. So we'll definitely have no relationship with them. I wanted to check, I know we do have one audience member, Mrs. Frater. We really appreciate you being here. If you were willing to, or if you had any questions or comments, if we could make sure that you're on the screen there, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I did have a couple of questions. What happens if we have to go full remote? The kids' schedules kind of got turned around here when they went to this new hybrid model. So what happens? Do they keep their teachers? Because some have new teachers, or are they going to go back to the teachers they had at the beginning of the year?
So we would do everything we can to keep them with the teachers that they currently have. That was one of the things we wanted to make sure when we made this move, because this move was very disruptive this time. And we wanted to make sure that we could minimize that. At the junior high, I think the schedules would stay the same for like 98% of the kids. Elementary, we would have to look at some of our remote students to see if there would have to be some adjustments just when you combine the classes. But again, that would be very minimal, nothing like it was in this last one a couple weeks ago.
Okay. And then I was just wondering, I guess my own curiosity, the high school, the kids who are remote Zoom into the same classrooms that the kids who are in person are in. Why can't we do that at the junior high level?
So we've had conversations about that, and we would have to buy some technology, which obviously would not be that difficult. But it comes down to some of the teacher comforts with that. And again, we have heard, even in talking with the high school and some other districts who've used that, some of the difficulty of trying to make sure they're getting both, which is why we felt it was really important to have remote teachers to teach those students specifically so that they could still break down into small groups with them. So we wanted to make sure that we could do that.
I feel like maybe, not that I want my children to have a lot of homework. Nobody wants to have a lot of homework. But I feel like maybe they need to have more work. Like, I feel like my daughter is, her teachers are doing a really great job. I'm not saying that they're not, but maybe they need a little bit more in their day. Like with the remote schedule, she signs off at 10:40, she doesn't sign back on until 12:40, then she's off again until like 2:15. But maybe there could be a little bit more for them to do and throughout the day, you know.
And I would say that I really think that's where differentiation for students comes into play. Because a lot of the calls we get are our kids can't have any work because they're so stressed out just from this. And that's why we really have to rely on our teachers and their expertise to learn and to continue to differentiate, like, all right, this kid needs more. This kid is stressed to the max, and maybe we need to let off a little bit.
And so I realize that this is unprecedented times. I don't want them to fall behind so that when they go into high school that they're struggling. And then now you guys are talking about this Ivy League, maybe utilizing rooms here for childcare. My understanding was in between AM and PM, you're going to be cleaning. How can you clean if there's students still in the building?
So the students would have to be in a central location. Like, let's say we use this room, and nobody else would be in here other than those kids during that time. The cleaning would take place throughout the entire rest of the building.
So then you wouldn't be able to utilize this room during the school day.
Correct.
I think that's all I have.
Okay. Mrs. Frater, we really thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Do any of the other board members have any other questions? Mrs. Egan?
Are the 14 kids all in the same half-day section, or are there some in the AM and some in the PM?
Some are in AM, some are in PM, and then some are before school, some are after school.
Right, so there are not 14 students at the same time.
That's correct.
And some kids are using before school and then literally traveling to school like Rye used to do, or they're before school and staying for the AM session of Ivy League and then traveling for the afternoon session? Or is there like a variety of different situations?
There's all the varieties of situations. Everyone has different ones.
Okay. So, I mean, really, you at this point, like if the numbers did not change, you're not even looking at trying to place 14 students in the same space.
Yeah, if numbers didn't change, you would not have 14 at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Picciolini, who is going to move to her first item on the Chief School Business Officials report.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I wanted to talk about is just the time frame in the process for the pre-K playground selection over at Ridge Lawn. Currently, Studio GC is working on putting together some renderings and sketches, and those will be available to be shared with the board at the November meeting. And that is the meeting where I envision a discussion with the board in terms of location and do we want to fence it, the size, more of the particulars of what we really want that playground to be. And then based on that discussion, Studio GC now will go back to the vendors and request bids based on the board's recommendations and specifications. And then on the December meeting, we would like to present to the board a couple options that are within the budget constraints and what the board is looking for. And once the board narrows that down, we want to go back to Ridge Lawn and now have the students do some sort of vote and participate in the selection process. And that's going to be a little bit of a tight turnaround because our board meeting in December is December 8th. So we would need to have that selection done prior to the students leaving for winter break, because then ideally we would like to have the board award the contract at the January meeting. So that's just a real brief overview of the time frame. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, so the second item on my agenda is the tax levy. And this is just going to be a very brief overview of the process. This is not the tentative levy. We are not talking dollar values at this time. It's just a general overview. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so we just want to talk about the 2020 property tax levy overview. And one of the reasons the levy is so important is the revenue from local property taxes equate to 35% of our budget that we presented back in September. And it's very important to really understand the levy process. And the districts in Cook County and other counties throughout the state, we are subject to the property tax extension limiting law. We might have referred to it in the past as PTEL, or understanding the tax cap. And basically what that means is we can only have taxes extended which are either the lower of 5% that we received the year before, or CPI, Consumer Price Index. And the CPI measures the inflationary factor. We use the 2019 inflationary factor, which was 2.3%. And then we always incorporate new property into our tax levy. Okay, so this graph is just a little of the historical CPI. Again, the CPI being the rate of inflation. For 2019, it was 2.3. It hasn't been that high since 2011 when it was 3%. And this was the first increase we've had in several years. Okay, and the reason CPI is important is because it determines what we are allowed in our annual levy. So basically, when we go out and we request our levy, the county will not award us more than our previous year plus our CPI, which is our 2.3%. And it's always very important to understand that if we do not levy at our maximum amount, we will never get that money back, because the extension is always based on prior year. So we always encourage the board to levy at the maximum rate allowed by the county. And two terms that always get a little bit confusing are the tax extension. The extension is what has been allowed by the county, as opposed to the levy. The levy is the amount that we ask. We can ask for millions and millions of dollars, but we are only going to be awarded what we are legally able to achieve. Okay, so this is just the past 10 years of our equalized assessed value, our EAV. 2019, the EAV for our area was approximately 151,000. As you can see, we're way off our highs back in 2010 when the EAV was $211 million. Okay, and the reason EAV is so important is because it has an inverse relationship with the tax rate. So if our EAV goes up, our tax rate goes down, and vice versa. But what I think is very important for community members to understand is that doesn't really impact their property taxes, because we are still paying the same amount in taxes. But if the EAV value of our homes go down, that is going to inflate our tax rate. So it has that inverse relationship. And in terms of a levy, it's very important because there's a couple of funds out there that we can only levy at a certain amount. So if our EAV calculation is off one way or the other, and we exceed those percentages, we could virtually be leaving money on the table. So we go through and we test it to make sure, based on different assumptions, we are prepared in our estimate. Okay, so this is the historical information of our tax rate. So in 2019, our ending tax rate was 5.013%. We really don't know that until the spring of 2020. Even though we're starting the levy process now, this doesn't become finalized till March of next year. And the different colors just really represent the different funds. The education fund being the orange, obviously the highest where most of our levy dollars go. Okay, and this is just my favorite graph because when we talk about tax rate and EAV and the inverse relationship, this really emphasizes what's going on. The dark line is going to be the tax rate and the lighter line is going to be the EAV. So EAV in 2018 was approximately 154 million. Well, we see that go down in 2019 to that 151. Well, you see the EAV go down and correspondingly up here, you see the tax rates go up. So I really think that graph shows you a good relationship to the tax rate and the EAV. And we always like to compare tax rates for neighboring districts. And I always like to choose the districts that are served by the Worth Township, which are in our area. So you could see here over on the left, what I have circled is the 5.013 tax rate for Chicago Ridge. And really, we're kind of right in the middle. The example shows 3 districts that are higher and 3 districts that are lower. And this is a similar graph just charted over the last 10 years. And the big heavy black line is Chicago Ridge. And just like the previous graph showed, we're pretty much in the middle there. And when you see this big dip here on the 2017, what happened was in 2017, our EAV took a hit, so it went down. So I'm sorry, the EAV would have gone up, so the tax rate would have gone down. Okay, so when we put our levy together, we have to do a lot of assumptions. And right now I am contemplating estimating EAV with little or no increase. Traditionally, this is a year that we would increase our EAV based on historical information because it's the year our area will be assessed. But in speaking with different districts, we're really probably going to do a conservative approach because we really don't know what those values are going to come in at. Estimate and new construction, we always put in about 200,000-300,000. We're a very older community. We don't have a lot of new construction, so that's going to be minimal. The recommendation would be to levy at the 2.3%. And we always do put in a balloon levy to make sure we capture any new construction that we might have overlooked. Okay, so this graph is just an estimated homeowner impact with the 2.3%. So if we take this property value of the $225,000 home, that is what the market value is, that would have an associated EAV of $65,000. The county comes in, the state comes in, and they do their magic. So they turn that $225,000 home into an EAV of 65,000. So the increase based on our levy alone would be about $64.13. And you could see there then the different property values on how that would impact the typical homeowner. And why we always levy to the maximum, there's always some sort of control some issues that are out of control. This year, obviously, it's the coronavirus impact. A board member earlier asked, where are we at with our budget? Right now, we are on budget and we are on target and we feel we have ample funds. We never want to put the district in the situation not to have ample funds. And this is the first year that we have not received any new money from evidence-based funding. The good news is we did receive the money, or we are receiving the money rather, from last year, but we did not receive that additional tier funding. So just a couple of concerns with our revenue stream. Mm-hmm.
Didn't the state say they were gonna continue to send this particular year the same money we got last year?
Yes, that's exactly it. So
Or
last
we haven't gotten anything?
No. We are getting, and I'm just talking estimates here. Last year, let's say we got $10 million. In prior years, we would get the $10 million plus additional tier 1 funding. What we're not getting is that additional tier 1 funding. So we will be, and we are getting the 10 million, but no more.
Do we expect to still get that later, maybe?
Right now, it's not looking
It's gonna
good.
be,
Yeah, so our concern is, even though they've outlined what this year looks like, can that change, and certainly what impact it has for the future years?
now, do we expect money to be cut next year?
We don't know. It's too
Because
too
rumor
soon.
has that that's what it's gonna.
And it certainly could be. Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so what does this mean for time frame? Today, we're just going over the overview of the levy. In November, we will adopt, I will be asking the board to adopt the tentative levy, because in order to approve the levy in December, you have to adopt a tentative. So it is another 2-step process, which is consistent with past history. And then, of course, we will file with the Cook County Clerk by the last Tuesday in December. So does anyone have any questions on that? I'm going to stop sharing so I could see hands. I'm sure there's going to be riveting questions coming my way. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Thorns. Thank you.
Kathy, I'm glad you referred to it as a riveting presentation. So thank you. Thank you very much. At this time, just looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Callan on the second. Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mr. Hillman.
Aye.
Mrs. Callan. Ms. Davenport.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer. Again, thank you everyone for being with us for these presentations and for some very good questions. Hope everyone